Hello for week 3 of Leadership Keys. We are up to our second leadership code, the 21st Gene Key, and we're going to be exploring T'Challa as a character arc for this Gene Key. So, the 21st Gene Key has the Shadow of Control, the Gift of Authority, and the City of Valor. And I think that T'Challa and the Black Panther, the first Black Panther movie, really illustrates this Gene Key so well. And it really is just the perfect example of the gift. And I think that he spends most of this movie in his gift of authority. And we only see the shadow come out at the time of internal conflict for him in the movie, which I will talk about. So the 21st Gene Key is all about leadership through thy will. This gift of authority is about when this leader speaks and acts from their heart, from what they believe is right, and not necessarily what they believe mentally, but following their heart, the true essence of what they believe, they will inspire loyalty, true loyalty in others. And I think that loyalty is a really interesting theme when exploring the Black Panther movie because, a lot of the characters are very loyal to the throne, to the king, and T'Challa is the king for most of the movie, but there is a time when, officially he isn't the king and he still inspires that loyalty in others. And in the time when he is the king, I know that it's easy to say, like they're loyal to the throne, not necessarily to him, but we see like a contrast between other kings, and we see that the loyalty really is to him and that he inspires that loyalty within others to follow his will. Because with this gift of authority, this leader becomes the trusted decision maker, and they stand very tall in their own dignity. They have like the essence and the light of nobility that really shines within them. So again, like very fitting for a king. And this gift of authority also really unites rather than controlling and manipulating people. It's about uniting people, which I think is a really beautiful theme throughout the Black Panther movie as well. And the shadow of control, this becomes, the shadow comes through being filled with tightness and fear and wanting to control the situation, or like more specifically, wanting to control the narrative. And that's really how this shadow comes about for T'Challa in the first Black Panther movie as well. So this is where the leader starts to use their personal agenda, their personal fears to um to control the hierarchy, to control the narrative. Often it will come with an abuse of power because they're in a position of leadership. In like the extreme reactive side of this shadow, they can become a tyrant, which I don't think T'Challa ever gets to that level, or to that facet of this shadow. But in the shadow, someone with this style of leadership can become a tyrant, very controlling. Or on the repressive side, they can become someone that is in denial to the power that they have, and someone that defers their power so that they don't have to assume responsibility for whatever has occurred. And all of this is being channeled from the city of Valor, which is nobility in action, which is absolute courage, virtue, wisdom, and above all, sacrifice. And I think we really see like the light of Valor really shine within T'Challa. So let's go into the movies that we meet T'Challa in and that we see him in. So the first movie that he is introduced through is Civil War. We talked about this movie when we talked about Steve Rogers. T'Challa has a much smaller role in this movie. It's like the introduction to his character, but I think it does reveal something. So I'm really only going to speak to how he is in the movie. It doesn't really speak to the overall plot. But so this movie, we meet T'Challa as the son of King T'Chaka. And King T'Chaka is the king of Wakanda. And we meet him at this United Nations meeting. There is the United Nations headquarters is blown up, and King T'Chaka is killed in that explosion. And T'Challa obviously, deals with the loss of his father, his king, and he takes it personally because he was there to protect the king. And he feels, a personal shame about that like he wasn't able to protect his father, and he wasn't able to protect the king when he is the Black Panther. He's meant to be the protector of Wakanda. So his first reaction from this anger that is, reactive from what he feels about, his grief, his responsibility, and all of that, his first reaction is to hunt down the person that he believes at the time is responsible for his father's death. And who he believes that is Bucky, the Winter Soldier, which Bucky was set up, which I'm pretty sure I mentioned when I talked about Civil War in Steve's perspective. So he believes that Bucky Kill is responsible for his father's death, which we know he wasn't. So he ends up like trying to chase Bucky down, which inevitably like entangles him with the Avengers and in this like big fight and conflict that is happening with all of them. So he ends up fighting with some of the Avengers ultimately to get to Bucky. So he later discovers that it was Zemo who was behind the attack that killed his father. And this is like the key moment that we see within T'Challa within this movie, that he has this realization that he was so blinded by his anger and his grief and his all the other things that came up for him. He was so blinded by that he almost killed an innocent man. Like he almost took violent revenge on sight, like before getting any evidence, before getting any proof. Like he almost killed an innocent man because he was so blinded by needing to get revenge, needing to prove that he could be a protector, and to avenge his father's death. So when he realizes that, after discovering that it was Zemo, he uses that moment to let go of his anger and to be the leader and to be the person that will become the king. And he takes Zemo in for a different form of justice. And a quote from him in the movie is, "Vengeance has consumed you," because, Zemo was, in his eyes, avenging the death of his family, which he held the Avengers responsible for. So he says to Zemo, "Vengeance has consumed you. It's consuming them," talking about the Avengers. "I'm done letting it consume me." So it was in that moment that T'Challa was able to let go of that need for vengeance, that anger within himself. And he puts his duty as a leader ahead of his anger and grief. So that's really what we see of him within Civil War. And then we see T'Challa in his movie, which, is all about him and his journey and Wakanda and his people as a whole. So we see a lot more of a story arc for him in the Black Panther movie. So from the very beginning of the movie, we see that there is just this like natural love and respect that everybody has for T'Challa. And part of it is that, he was the prince now becoming the king and becomes the king. And we see like the loyalty within Wakanda as a whole. But I feel like, it is subtle how it is played out in the movie, but we just see that everyone has like this natural respect for T'Challa, and everyone just naturally sees him as this authority figure, which I know part of it is him becoming the king. So T'Challa officially becomes the king. I am, of course, like I've gone through the other movies, I am going to kind of skip to certain plot points, just to highlight the theme of this Gene Key. But T'Challa becomes the king in his initiation ceremony. And in this ceremony, there are different tribes within Wakanda, and T'Challa's tribe has been like the leader and the king, like the leader of Wakanda for generations. I'm not sure exactly how many generations, but I think a long lineage. And every tribe that is present at the initiation ceremony says, like, we will not be challenging for the throne. They accept T'Challa as their king. But there is another tribe that M'Baku is the leader of that he, comes in and says, I want to challenge for the throne. So M'Baku and T'Challa fight. It is the ceremony where they fight to either death or to yield. And T'Challa ultimately, wins the fight, and he is, imploring M'Baku to like yield. I do not want to kill you. I want you to yield. Like, I don't want to leave your tribe without a leader. And we see, T'Challa's leadership here that, it was fair game to fight to the death, but he does not want, and even though M'Baku like had, from what we see, every intention to kill T'Challa if he got the chance, T'Challa, doesn't want that. He doesn't want to kill unnecessarily. He wants M'Baku to yield, which he does. And then M'Baku, goes away. T'Challa is king. Soon after that, the Wakandans and T'Challa learn about vibranium, which is, so at the beginning of this movie, you get a little bit of the backstory about vibranium. It is, the strongest metal in the world. It is something that is very capable of creating the very advanced technology that they have in Wakanda. But the Wakanda as a country decided to keep it a secret from the rest of the world, to not let out like what it's capable of, and to keep it for themselves and to stay in control of it for themselves. So they learned that there is some vibranium on the black market. So T'Challa and a few others leave in order to investigate. This is where he meets Eric Killmonger, and in stuff happens. They come across like who was selling it. Anyway, Eric comes along, and as he is escaping with the person that was putting the vibranium on the black market, T'Challa notices that Eric is wearing a necklace with the family ring, a ring that is identical to the ring that T'Challa's father gave to him, which I'm pretty sure he says that was his grandfather's ring. So this makes T'Challa suspicious, in like, why would this man who is, connected to this vibranium, why is he wearing a ring that is identical to mine that my father gave to me? So this is where T'Challa learns this uncomfortable truth that his dad, King T'Chaka, killed his own brother and left his brother's son in, like, abandoned with and left him to find his dead father. And then when T'Chaka like came back to Wakanda, like he didn't tell anyone of this. So it's, like that hidden family secret that his own father killed. His father killed his brother and abandoned a young child, like his son. So T'Challa is discovering that he has this cousin that has been, on his own and left out from Wakanda, like after his father was murdered. So he learns this really uncomfortable truth. And I think this is the moment where we see the shadow of control within T'Challa, and we see how him just falling a little into that shadow leads to, a series of events that maybe could have been handled differently if he was acting from his gift the entire time. So in this shadow, we see the tightness and the fear take over. And, there's a lot of emotions at play, but the tightness and like the fear of other people discovering this, the fear of the implications that this will have. So we see T'Challa begin to start to want to control the narrative around this. We see him wanting to hide the truth from his fear, and this influences and impacts the quality of the decisions that he begins to make. So Eric breaks into Wakanda. He comes and he starts to reveal his identity to like the council that they have, like the leaders of each tribe. He starts to reveal his identity, that he is of royal blood. And T'Challa does not want this to get out, and we see this in the moment that he's really trying to control what information everyone hears in that moment. But of course it comes out and it is revealed that T'Challa just discovered this and like was trying to conceal this truth from everyone. Eric challenges the throne. So again, they have to go to that um the same place where he had his initiation ceremony. They have to go back there. Eric and T'Challa fight, and Eric wins. T'Challa is thrown off the cliff. Everyone thinks that he is dead, but actually M'Baku's tribe saved him. And T'Challa's family go and find him. They give him the heart-shaped herb, and he is the Black Panther again, and he goes to fight Eric to take back Wakanda. So then here again, like we see the way that T'Challa inspires loyalty. This M'Baku's tribe, who have been secluded from the rest of Wakanda and have not got involved and have not taken leadership from the king for generations, like they want to follow T'Challa. Like he inspires that loyalty within them. We see when they are in the battle that even though like there are so many people there who have been so loyal to serve the king for so long, they are more inspired by T'Challa to follow him, and to see him as the authority. And I know that it's easier when like Eric Killmonger, like he doesn't have intentions that they agree with, but it's still like a conflict for them because he is technically like their king at the time. So we see in this fight like the authority that T'Challa has, like through the loyalty that he inspires through others, and from his willingness to take a stand in what is right, what he believes is right. So then after so then there is that final fight, and then after T'Challa is triumphant, he wins this final battle. Eric Killmonger is dead. He and T'Challa wants to save him. Like he wants to bring him in, and he wants to atone for his father's sin in a way, but Eric Killmonger, like he chooses to die watching the sunset, and T'Challa gives him that last dignity of dying the way that he wants to. And then after that, we see how this exchange, like with his cousin and this revelation about his father, we see how that shifts his perspective, because then he reveals the truth about Wakanda to the rest of the world and the truth about vibranium. And we see that he is a different kind of king and leader from his father and from his ancestors. But we also see that he starts to, we see him visit the ancestral plane twice in this movie, and his view of his ancestors, like in his lineage, the lineage of kings, we see his view on them. We see that he sees himself like at the level that, he, even though his dad like was a king and the Black Panther, and as were all of the other, this legacy, this lineage that he's following, like at the end of the day, they were just people as well. And that he has to be the king and the leader and the protector and the ruler in the way that he needs to be, in the way that he wants to be. There are so many other things that happen in this movie, and I didn't even really talk to the motivations that Eric had, but I think if when you watch the movie, you'll see that how it actually, that conflict and that contrast brings to light more of T'Challa's gifts and shadows. So through this whole movie, we really see the type of king and leader he is. He is truly one with great authority, and the word like authority, has the word author in it. Someone who is like has so much influence over the narrative. But when they start to bring their personal agendas and their personal grief and anger and all of those things within it, they start to control the narrative in a way that isn't serving. And that often leads to challenges and struggles and suffering, which it did for T'Challa. But ultimately, he chooses the light and he chooses to be in his gift. So I think he really just had a really bright light of authority in this movie, and a little moment of going into his shadow so that he could evolve through that and become a better leader for it. So then we see T'Challa again in Infinity War and Endgame. I only made a little small space for these because I don't think we see a lot of his character per se in these movies. We really only see him in like the big fight scenes. But one thing that I think stands out about T'Challa in this movie is how he opens Wakanda for others to take refuge in, and he opens Wakanda to protect others, but then also, to fight and to, like everyone that is in Wakanda is willing to follow T'Challa, their king, their leader, into that fight. And this is where, I talked about when I was talking about Steve Rogers, how they wanted to save Vision. And this is where they take Vision to Wakanda to try to find a way to save him. And we know how that ends. But when Wakanda becomes under attack, people trust him and they follow him into the battle, which again like highlights his authority and their trust in his decision making as well. So I feel like, there may be other little moments that I'm missing, but I feel like from a story perspective and a character perspective, I don't think we see much beyond that in these two movies. I think it was much more focused on a lot of other characters. So then we come into the second Black Panther movie, Wakanda Forever, and T'Challa like devastatingly dies at the beginning of this movie, which, if you're an MCU fan, you'll know that Chadwick Boseman, who played T'Challa, heartbreakingly like passed away before this movie was made, and they integrated that in with his character within Wakanda Forever. But we I think I wanted to still include this movie, even though he isn't in it per se, because we really see his legacy and we still really feel his presence throughout this movie. And I think this really speaks to the light of his gift and this loyalty and deep respect that other people had for him, and like the unity that he is still bringing even through his death. And it's not just because, I know we're closely following his family, his sister, his mother, his partner, his Nakia, like his girlfriend. Um but also, all of Wakanda is like really mourning T'Challa's death, and his absence is like really felt, even though like his presence is still there. And something that I wanted to make a note of is that we see Shuri, his sister, take on the mantle of the Black Panther, and we see her have her own journey to accept that that role within Wakanda. And we see her face a journey that is similar to the journey T'Challa faced in Civil War. So within the movie, their mother is killed, and we see Shuri like take on that anger and grief and want revenge, like exactly like T'Challa did in Civil War. She wants revenge. And we ultimately see her take a similar path where she comes to realize that, the revenge that she initially seeked out was not in service to the greater good. And she learns how to like let go of that anger and let go of that need for violence and vengeance in that moment. And we see like the influence that her brother had on her in that moment. And she, like, her brother is still inspiring these better decisions to be made, um, even in his death. So I think that was like a really beautiful moment as well in Wakanda Forever. And there are so many really, really powerful moments in that movie. And a lot of it I feel like is very connected to the character that T'Challa was. So Shuri will have a different journey, as so we see her take on Black Panther, but we also see her um not take on not become the queen of Wakanda. We see at the very end of the movie, M'Baku is like challenging for the throne. Um and so he may very well become the king. So she's the Black Panther, but she's not the ruler of Wakanda at the end of the movie anyway. So you can maybe contemplate a little around like what Jinki or what story arc do you see illustrated in Shuri's journey? And I don't have an exact answer for that right now. I think the more, we saw her go on a journey through Wakanda Forever, but I think it was very much influenced like through her grief. So I think seeing the challenge that she faces next, I hope we see her again, may give us a better indication of what her journey will be as a leader and if she will take on the role of the leader beyond being the Black Panther. So that is the 21st Gene Key through T'Challa and the Black Panther. The other gene key I wanted to talk about today was the 38th gene key. And I think that this gives us this illustration of, so I'm going to talk about Thor because this is about, the warrior who leads you into battle. And Thor was a king as well, but he led in a way that was very, very different to the way that T'Challa led. So I wanted to give this altering perspective of someone who was also a king, but also someone who, there was always a battle to fight as well. So I think that Thor is like the perfect representation of this 38th Jinki. The shadow is struggle, where in the shadow you become addicted to and very stubborn to just fight. And basically you become very locked into combat and you struggle. Everything is taken personally. Everything is met with anger without consideration for who it may hurt or for what the further implications may be. And you're either very aggressive and cannot help but fight with no purpose at all, or you become defeated and internally blame yourself and kind of sink into that defeated hole. The gift is perseverance. And this is where you're really designed to overcome any obstacle. You really thrive when you're up against the odds. You're a person of action. You take a stand in the good fight, but you take a pause. You take a moment to breathe before you act. And your commitment to the fight feeds your spirit with all the stamina you need to fight. And this comes from the city of honor, like the warrior who reaches their ultimate potential. They turn combat into dance, and to honor someone is to hold them to their highest frequency. And because, Thor has his own 3 movies and he's in the Avengers movies. Actually, he has his own 4 movies now, and he's in the Avengers movies. I think we see like a lot of story when it comes to Thor. And if I went through every movie, like I could highlight this journey of this Jinky like in all of them, which I'm not gonna do. I'm not gonna do right now, but just some moments like perseverance. Like I think we really see the gift of Thor as a warrior in so many moments, like moments that initially come to mind of like him thriving when he's up against the odds, in Infinity War, where he is making, when he loses his hammer and goes to make his axe, he he has to hold open this thing while like the energy of like a star comes through, and everyone is basically like, this is no one can survive this, and he was like, it won't kill me unless I die or something like that. So like there's moments like that where like he really thrives in those moments where everyone is, the odds are against him. In Ragnarok, where he is in the battle with Hulk, like everyone does not expect him to win this fight, but of course he does, before he's like zapped. This moment comes to mind, which I actually can't recall which movie it's in. I think it is Ragnarok, actually. At the beginning of the movie, he's like fighting against oh my gosh, I forgot the name, but like that big fire head thing, I think it is. He's like hanging upside down, like on chains, and it's like he's actually thriving in that moment, even though he's literally like tied up, hanging upside down. Like there are so many moments where he will face any obstacle in a fight, in a battle, and he will make it look easy. I think one of my all-time favorite moments in Infinity War, and probably in like a lot of the MCU, is when he gets to Wakanda, like, and he's just, he's there for the fight. He's always there for the fight. So I think we see like his gift of perseverance and, his capacity to overcome any obstacle to get to the fight and to be in the fight. I think we see that highlighted in a lot of him. We also see him in his shadow, and we see him in his shadow in a reactive way and a repressive way. When we first meet him, a lot of him is very much this stubborn person who is addicted to being in a fight. We see this within the first Thor movie where he like he goes to fight the frost giants like against Odin, against his father, his king's advice or like orders. And he just wants to fight them. He just wants to be in a battle. And when like he's almost ready to turn away, but they make one little remark about him, and of course he takes it personally and the fight ensues. And we see that stubbornness and that need to be in a fight a lot, within that first movie and within some of the other movies as well. And we see him, fighting for no purpose. Like there was no purpose to fight those frost giants. But then we also see, so that's like the reactive side of the shadow, but we also see him in the repressive side of the shadow when they lose in Infinity War. And then at the beginning of Endgame, when they discover that, there's actually no way to come back from this at the beginning of the movie, and it's like 5 years later, we see him sink into that defeated depression because we see him have this internal blame for himself. Like Thor blames himself for them losing in Infinity War against Thanos. And we see like that defeatedness in him. And the way to break out of the shadow of struggle into that gift of perseverance when you're in the repressive shadow is to have like there needs to be a fight worth fighting to wake you up. So when there is this possibility to come back from what Thanos did, like that, revives him and brings him back. And it is through that he comes back into his gifts and he comes back into seeing himself as a warrior again, as someone who can fight again. When we see him in Thor Love and Thunder, we actually see like his calm. We see him like I think it's towards the start of the movie when he's still with the Guardians of the Galaxy. We see him like meditating on this mountain and they're like, we need you to fight this thing, and he comes there like he's so calm. He fights, it is literally like a dance. And then he's done. So he's like so calm and grounded, like within that fight. And we also see, at the end of Love and Thunder, where, like we really see this city of honor shine through when he is in, like those final moments with Gore, the God Butcher, like he holds his adversary to his highest frequency. And it's in that moment that like he inspires a different choice from someone who had very clear intentions to rid the world of gods. Like from the beginning, he decides to make a different choice to bring his daughter back to life instead. And then we see Thor at the end of the movie, he has Love, his, I guess, adopted or fostered daughter, however you want to look at her. And I think that will take Thor on a very, again, like another interesting arc. And I don't know like how much of Thor we're gonna see, how much more of Thor we're gonna see in future MCU movies. But I think that we may see his gifts and his shadow in a different light, or we may see him take on a different story arc and a new story arc. But I think from all of the movies we've seen within the MCU to date, it's very much this 38th Gene Keely. He is the warrior. And even when I say he's a different kind of king, we see him be like a very, very different king because he's more in battle than he is a leader and a ruler, like to his people. And even though his people really look to him with like they look to him to guidance, they're looking to him to take on the fight rather than to lead them into the fight. And of course there are people that will follow him into the fight, but most of his people are like, can you take care of this in a high frequency way. And we also see him, like he doesn't necessarily want to be the king, or he doesn't necessarily want to be the leader to people, but he is willing to fight for his people as well. And he gives the title of king to Valkyrie, and he's more than happy for other people to take on like those leadership roles, and he'll just go in and fight the battles that need to be fought. So we really see a different kind of king, a different kind of leader within Thor. So what kind of leaders in your life do you see embody the 21st gene key and also the 38th gene key? And I know that, like in stories and movies where there actually are battles and fights, sometimes it's easier to see these represented. But take everything that I've shared as, symbolic, and what leaders do you really recognize these themes in symbolically within your life? Or within other forms of media as well. And then exploring the shadows, like are these shadows of control or struggle, that do they come up for you at all? And can you see the gift that is within those shadows? And then the last question, or the last prompt for you to contemplate, is what does all of this exploration bring up within you to muse on, to contemplate, to play with? How are these themes, these stories present in your life, or how are they stories and themes that you can pull inspiration and musing and wisdom and revelations and insights and all of those things from? So thank you so much for being here for our third installment of Leadership Keys. So excited for our fourth and final that is coming next, where we're going to talk about the seventh gene key. Thank you so much for being here. I'm sending you so much love. Have an amazing, amazing day.